Breaking news. MS Now has just learned that FBI Director Kash Patel may be out of a job in the coming months. 3 people with knowledge of the situation say President Trump and his top aides have grown tired of Patel and the unflattering headlines he's been generating recently, including using a government jet to visit his girlfriend and enlisting a SWAT team as her security detail.
Well, Katie, I should say, first of all the qualifiers apply here. With Donald Trump and personnel decisions, you never actually know exactly what's going on. But we are being told that Kash Patel, the FBI director, is on increasingly thin ice. And the president is considering replacing him by the end of the year with Andrew Bailey, the former Attorney General of Missouri, who is acting now as co-deputy FBI director, along with Dan Bongino.
Hey family, Adam is here. There is a specific moment in every criminal defense when the strategy you've been banking on, the narrative you've been selling, the witness you've been pointing to as your ultimate vindication, walks into a grand jury room and walks out belonging to the prosecution. For Donald Trump, that moment just arrived, and the man at the center of it is Kash Patel.
From Carol Leonnig and Ken Delanian about an explosive pattern that begins with FBI Director Kash Patel under fire for eyebrow-raising headlines and ending with him lashing out to fire experienced FBI staff and agents. As we learned this week, that includes those with expertise in counterintelligence, global espionage, and Iran. Today, Carol and Ken report this, quote, in 4 key instances, Kash Patel's decision to fire FBI agents and staff came within hours or days of unflattering accounts emerging about him and his competency to run the FBI. They add this, quote, inside the FBI, staff and agents have been tracking this pattern and growing concerned that Kash Patel is jeopardizing the FBI's mission as a byproduct of trying to eliminate his bad press and shore up support with Trump, according to multiple FBI sources who spoke to MS Now.
The same Kash Patel Trump elevated, defended, and paraded in front of cameras as the insider who could prove the entire classified documents case was built on a lie. The same Kash Patel who spent months floating the story that Trump had issued a standing order declassifying everything he took to Mar-a-Lago, that the documents were never really classified, that the prosecution was politically motivated nonsense.
Now to FBI Director Kash Patel, who has fired at least 6 agents tied to the 2022 search of President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. That's what 6 people familiar with the matter tell NBC News. But 3 of those sources say at least 10 employees were ultimately dismissed. As you may recall, the FBI search was connected to the federal investigation into President Trump's handling of classified documents after he left the White House in 2021. He had pleaded not guilty and denied any wrongdoing. That case was ultimately dismissed by a judge who was appointed by President Trump. Monica, walk us through what we've learned about these employees who were fired, and has there been any response from the White House or the FBI at this point?
Yeah, you mentioned that there were those agents we know were dismissed, about 6 of them, but in total, we're told that these were 10 employees who work for the FBI. So that ranges to actual agents, to support personnel, and even including supervisors. And the FBI itself has not commented on this beyond a statement from the FBI director himself, Kash Patel.
That Kash Patel just testified under oath, and his testimony did not save Trump. It saved the prosecutors. Let me be brutally honest with you about what we're dealing with here. YouTube is flooded with videos claiming to show Trump screaming at Patel, Trump going psycho, Trump losing his mind in some dramatic confrontation. Those thumbnails are dramatizations. There is no verified footage of Trump literally blowing up at Patel in the Oval Office. But here's what makes this story more damaging than any fictional shouting match. The legal reality is worse. The documented, verified, legally significant reality is that Trump's hand-picked witness, the man his entire defense strategy relied on, was compelled by federal prosecutors to testify under oath with use immunity. And when he couldn't take the fifth anymore, when lying meant federal perjury charges, his sworn account lined up with the prosecution's theory of the case, not with the standing order defense Trump had been selling to the public. This is the gap that tells you everything. The gap between what Kash Patel said in media interviews when he was free to help Trump, and what Kash Patel said under oath when lying carried criminal consequences. That gap is the exact measurement of how strong the declassification defense actually is. And right now, that measurement is 0. Let's start with the foundation. Kash Patel was not some peripheral figure in the classified documents case. He was the star witness Trump's team pointed to as the authoritative insider who could confirm the standing declassification order story. When reporters asked how classified documents ended up at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's allies pointed to Patel. When the defense needed someone to explain that Trump had issued a broad order before leaving office, automatically declassifying anything he took, Patel was the name they dropped. He was the human shield the Trump legal team positioned between the former president and the special counsel, and for months, that shield held. Patel went on television. Patel gave interviews. Patel floated the narrative. He was the proof that the prosecution was wrong. Then the Department of Justice did something that changed everything. They granted Kash Patel use immunity. Now most people hear immunity and think it's a deal, a favor, some kind of protection for the witness. That's wrong. Use immunity is a prosecutorial weapon. It's a legal tool specifically designed to strip away a witness's Fifth Amendment protection and force them to testify. Here's how it works. The Fifth Amendment allows witnesses to refuse to answer questions that might incriminate them. Use immunity removes that protection. The government agrees that the specific testimony Patel gives cannot be used against him personally. In exchange, Patel loses the right to take the Fifth. He must answer every question, he must answer truthfully, and every word he says is under penalty of perjury. Think about what that does to a witness like Patel. Before immunity, he could have walked into that grand jury, taken the Fifth on every relevant question, and contributed nothing. After immunity, he's in the worst possible position. He has to answer. He has to tell the truth. And if the truth doesn't match the story he's been telling in public, he's trapped. Because if he lies under oath, that's perjury. And Trump can't pardon him out of perjury in a state proceeding or in a case where the immunity-protected testimony creates exposure. The DOJ didn't do Patel a favor. They put him in a cage and locked the door. So what did Patel say when he was finally under oath, stripped of his Fifth Amendment protection, facing perjury if he lied? According to legal experts and reporters who have analyzed his grand jury testimony, Patel's sworn account lines up with the prosecutors. Sensitive records stayed classified. Formal declassification processes were not used. Those two statements are the exact opposite of the standing order defense. The standing order defense claims the records were declassified by a broad presidential order. Patel under oath said they stayed classified. The standing order defense claims Trump used legitimate declassification authority. Patel under oath said formal processes were not used. This is devastating for reasons that go beyond any single witness statement. The standing order defense was always legally fragile. Declassification of national security information isn't just a matter of presidential intention. It's a process governed by executive orders and federal regulations. There are requirements for documentation, requirements for notifying the agencies that originated the classified information, requirements for record keeping that creates an auditable trail. A standing order that isn't documented, isn't communicated through required channels, and isn't reflected in official records doesn't constitute legally effective declassification under the regulatory framework. Most constitutional scholars have found the standing order argument very difficult to sustain against the existing rules. But even a legally fragile defense can survive if you have the right witness, if you have someone who was there, someone who can testify under oath that the order existed, that Trump intended to declassify, that everyone understood the documents were no longer classified. That witness could create enough doubt, enough factual dispute to make the defense viable. Kash Patel was supposed to be that witness. Instead, he became the witness who confirmed the prosecution's version of events under oath. Now let's talk about the perjury lock, because this is what makes Patel's testimony permanent and unchangeable. Once you testify under oath in a grand jury proceeding, those words are locked in. They become part of the official record. They cannot be walked back. They cannot be revised through a subsequent media interview. Every future statement Patel makes that contradicts his sworn testimony creates potential perjury exposure. If he goes back on television and starts floating the standing order story again, prosecutors can pull his grand jury transcript and ask him which version is true. If the stories don't match, he's looking at felony charges. The testimony is frozen in time, fixed in the record, available in every future proceeding where the document's case is relevant. This is why the prosecution wanted Patel under immunity so badly. They didn't need him to volunteer information. They needed to put him in a position where confirming a false narrative under oath carried criminal consequences. They needed to take the public face of the standing order defense and make him choose between loyalty to Trump and loyalty to the truth under penalty of perjury. And when he made that choice, when he chose to tell the truth rather than face prison for lying, they got exactly what they wanted. Testimony that belongs to them. Testimony that undermines the defense. Testimony that cannot be undone. The political significance of this is enormous. Kash Patel was not just any witness. He was the anchor of Trump's public narrative on the documents case. He was the person Trump's operation pointed to when they wanted to say, "Here's someone who was there, who knows what happened, who can confirm the declassification story." His public advocacy for the standing order theory was part of the political strategy for managing the case in the court of public opinion. The DOJ's decision to grant him immunity was a direct strike at that strategy. They targeted the face of the narrative and forced him into a legal situation where the narrative he had been anchoring had to be defended under oath with perjury consequences for fabrication. And when the testimony didn't confirm the narrative, when the story Patel told under oath lined up with prosecutors rather than with the standing order theory, the narrative strategy collapsed at the same moment the legal strategy was undermined. The political and legal damage run together. The witness who was supposed to save the defense publicly and legally failed to save it when it counted under oath. Now, let's address the loyalty dimension, because this is part of a broader pattern. Patel did not walk into that grand jury room and voluntarily flip on Trump. He was compelled. He was stripped of his Fifth Amendment protection by an immunity grant that gave him no choice but to answer questions truthfully or face perjury charges. The loyalty was tested not by a moment of personal choice but by a federal legal mechanism specifically designed to separate personal loyalty from sworn testimony obligations. The result? Testimony that lines up with prosecutors rather than confirming the defense theory is not evidence that Patel betrayed Trump in some morally simple sense. It is evidence that when the legal mechanism forces the choice between confirming a story under oath that may not be true and facing perjury charges for lying, the loyalty calculus changes. This is the specific dynamic that immunity grants are designed to produce. And Trump's operation's reliance on loyalists as its primary legal protection, the assumption that people who have publicly advocated for the Trump narrative will continue to advocate for it when placed under oath, is an assumption the Patel situation has now specifically and publicly tested. The test produced testimony that belongs to the prosecution. That outcome, regardless of any personal relationship between Patel and Trump, regardless of any subsequent public statements either of them makes, is in the grand jury record permanently. Let me bring this home with the 4 points that matter most. First, use immunity is not a favor. It's a prosecutorial weapon designed to force reluctant witnesses into a position where loyalty to a target and sworn testimony obligations cannot coexist. The DOJ's decision to grant Patel use immunity was a decision to take the Fifth Amendment shield away from the witness Trump's operation had been counting on to confirm the standing order narrative. Once the shield was gone, Patel faced a binary choice. Answer truthfully under oath or face perjury charges that no loyalty relationship and no presidential pardon could protect him from. Second, the perjury lock is the specific legal consequence that makes Patel's testimony more than just an inconvenient witness statement. His sworn account is fixed in the grand jury record under penalty of perjury. Every subsequent public statement that contradicts it creates potential perjury exposure. Every future proceeding where the documents case is relevant, that testimony is there. It cannot be walked back. It cannot be revised through a media interview. It is what it is permanently in the official record. Third, the standing declassification defense was legally fragile before Patel's testimony and is significantly more fragile after it. The doctrinal problems with the theory, the regulatory declassification process requirements, the undocumented and uncommunicated character of the claimed order exist independent of what any witness says. Patel's testimony adds an evidentiary problem on top of the doctrinal problems. The best-positioned witness to confirm the story did not confirm it under oath. Now, the theory is doctrinally fragile and evidentially unsupported by the witness Trump's operation identified as its primary corroboration source. Fourth, the Patel immunity situation is the most direct illustration of the specific vulnerability in Trump's general legal strategy of relying on loyal insiders as both public narrative anchors and potential legal witnesses. The strategy works as long as loyal insiders can use the Fifth Amendment to protect both themselves and the narrative simultaneously. Use immunity specifically and deliberately breaks that strategy. Every Trump loyalist who has been publicly advocating for a specific version of events that serves Trump's legal defense is a potential target for the same prosecutorial tool that was deployed against Patel. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with Kash Patel, the insider Trump pointed to as the authoritative source for the standing declassification defense, compelled by use immunity to testify before a grand jury under penalty of perjury, giving sworn testimony that lined up with prosecutors rather than confirming the standing order story he had been promoting in public. It leaves us with that testimony permanently locked in the grand jury record, unchangeable without perjury exposure, available in any future proceeding where the documents case is relevant. It leaves us with the standing declassification defense facing both doctrinal fragility and evidentiary problems simultaneously, the best-positioned confirming witness having failed under oath to confirm it. And it leaves us with the demonstrated vulnerability of loyalty-based narrative strategies to the prosecutorial tool specifically designed to separate Fifth Amendment protection from sworn testimony obligations. Stay tuned. The next immunity grant, the next loyalist placed under oath, the next grand jury appearance that forces the same choice between narrative and perjury, each one tests the same strategy vulnerability the Patel situation has now publicly exposed, and the prosecution knows exactly where the vulnerability is.